Hello guys, this is your friend Itachi Fanfic 3.0 and we are back a new fanfic story which is: what if Naruto had his parents' love? Would he still dream of becoming Hokage, or would peace change his destiny forever? Part 1. Let's start fanfic without wasting more time. In a world where fate chose differently, the night of the Nine Tails attack did not end in tragedy. The yellow flash of Konoha, Minato Namikaze, stood not as a fallen hero, but as a living protector. The red-haired kunoichi who carried the beast within her, Kushina Uzumaki, did not breathe her last, but held her newborn son close as dawn broke over a village saved, not scarred. The hidden leaf still bore the marks of the battle, but its heart remained unbroken. In this world, the fourth Hokage lived. The Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails lived. And their son, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, was never the lonely child wandering empty streets. He was born into warmth, into laughter, into a home that smelled of ramen and ink and scrolls of jutsu. The boy grew up beneath two shadows, one golden, one crimson. His father, the Hokage, was a man who carried entire nations upon his shoulders but still found time to ruffle his son's hair after a long day. His mother, fierce and passionate, balanced the household with love and fiery temper. Together they built a life that blended greatness with simplicity. From his earliest memories, Naruto knew the weight of the Hokage's name. The village adored Minato, yet treated him with reverence that placed invisible walls between them. For young Naruto, this was confusing. He could not understand why people bowed to his father yet rarely looked him in the eyes when speaking to him. To Naruto, Minato was not the Hokage, he was just dad. The man who burned pancakes every morning. The man who tripped over scrolls when rushing to a mission. The man who smiled even when his eyes carried exhaustion. And Kushina. She was his storm. Her voice could shatter silence like lightning, her laughter could shake walls, and her arms were the safest place in the world. When Naruto scraped his knees during training, she was the one who patched them up, lecturing him fiercely before hugging him so tight he forgot the pain. Their house stood near the village's outer district, surrounded by trees where the wind rustled softly through leaves. At night, Naruto would watch fireflies glowing in the garden as his father worked late under the lamplight, writing reports for the Hokage's office. Sometimes Naruto stayed up, pretending to sleep, listening to the quiet murmur of his parents talking, plans, worries, hopes. Those were his favorite moments, because in them, he felt the rhythm of family. Yet destiny, even when bent, never sleeps. The Nine Tails remained sealed inside Kushina, its hatred restrained but not gone. She had survived because Minato had devised a new technique, one that transferred only half of the beast's chakra, leaving enough within her to survive but weakening the monster's will. It was a delicate balance, one that demanded constant vigilance. The villagers knew of it, and though they admired Kushina's strength, fear whispered behind closed doors. Naruto grew up shielded from most of that fear, but not all. He could feel it in glances, in the hushed tones that followed his mother's name. When he entered the ninja academy, he carried his parents' pride like armor. He was the Hokage's son, the child of the woman who once contained the Nine Tails. Expectations swirled around him like leaves in the wind. Every sparring match, every written test, every jutsu was measured not just against his peers, but against his parents' legacy. Naruto tried to ignore it. He tried to smile through it. But inside, he sometimes wished people saw him as himself. Not as the Hokage's son. Not as the child of legends. Just Naruto. Still, his home life gave him strength. When he came home bruised or frustrated, Minato's calm voice and Kushina's fiery encouragement always restored him. Minato taught him patience. The idea that true strength comes not from showing power but knowing when not to use it. Kushina taught him heart. That no matter what the world thought, he should never stop believing in himself. Years passed quietly in the village. Under Minato's leadership, Konoha entered a golden era of peace. The other nations watched the leaf with wary respect. The scars of the previous wars were healing. Even the Uchiha clan, still within the village, had begun to re-establish trust with the Hokage. In this world, Naruto grew up alongside Sasuke Uchiha, not as rivals from pain, but as equals from privilege. Sasuke's brother, Itachi, remained the prodigy of the clan, a shinobi admired by all. Without the darkness of war and suspicion, the Uchiha coup never took root. Itachi stayed loyal, his brilliance used to unify rather than divide. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura Haruno eventually found themselves in the same class at the academy. But unlike the Naruto of another timeline, this one was already disciplined. He did not prank teachers out of loneliness, he challenged them out of curiosity. He was mischievous, yes, but his mischief came from confidence, not from a craving for attention. Still, he was restless. He admired his father deeply but feared living in his shadow forever. Every time villagers called him Little Hokage, a small part of him wondered if he would ever be known for something of his own. Minato noticed this. One evening, after a long day at the office, he returned home and found Naruto training alone under the setting sun. The boy's kunai marks littered the wooden post, sweat dripping down his face, eyes burning with determination. Minato didn't interrupt. He simply watched. In that moment, he saw not his son, but a spark of something far greater. That night, he made a quiet decision. He would allow Naruto to find his own path, not by guiding every step, but by stepping aside when needed. From that day, Naruto's training changed. Minato still taught him fundamentals, chakra control, sealing arts, and tactical reasoning, but encouraged him to seek his own style. Kushina trained him in taijutsu and resilience, often chasing him through forests during her lessons. Their family became not just a home, but a small battlefield of laughter, sweat, and unspoken love. By the time Naruto graduated from the academy, he was confident yet humble. His chakra control was above average, though still unstable when he got excited. His ninjutsu skills were sharp, especially his affinity for wind-based techniques inherited from his father. But his heart, his empathy, his ability to see goodness in others, was his greatest gift. Team 7 was formed under a different sky. Kakashi Hatake, the man who once watched over Minato's legacy, became their Jonin leader. He saw in Naruto not the orphan of prophecy, but the child of his beloved sensei, full of potential, mischief, and light. Life in this version of Konoha was peaceful, yet peace brings its own kind of test. Without war, shinobi risked losing purpose. Missions grew routine. Glory faded. Naruto sometimes looked at the stone faces of past Hokage and wondered what kind of world they had fought for. He began to feel that the world of shinobi was changing into something new, less about survival, more about ideals. He wanted to be part of that change. When he was 12, a new threat stirred beyond the borders, a movement from the hidden mist, led by remnants of rogue shinobi who sought to overthrow the established balance. Unlike Akatsuki of the other timeline, these were not demons but revolutionaries who despised peace, believing it weakened the ninja spirit. Their actions drew the attention of the Five Kage, and for the first time in many years, a summit was held. Naruto did not understand all the politics, but he could feel the tension rising in the adults around him. Minato became busier, Kushina more anxious. Naruto watched his parents bear the weight of leadership and sacrifice. He wanted to help, but they told him he was still too young. Yet destiny has a way of testing the young early. One night, when clouds covered the moon, a small squad of rogue shinobi infiltrated Konoha's outskirts. They were remnants of the movement, seeking to kidnap the child of the Hokage as leverage. They failed miserably. Naruto's parents and Anbu guards intercepted them, but the incident changed everything. For the first time, Naruto saw death up close. One of the attackers had been just a boy, barely older than him. That night haunted him. He began to question what peace truly meant. Was peace merely the absence of war, or the presence of understanding? Minato explained that peace is never perfect, that even in stillness, there are hearts that cannot rest. But Kushina added something more profound. The world doesn't need you to fight it, Naruto. It needs you to love it enough to change it. Those words stayed with him. As months turned into years, Naruto began to mature into a shinobi unlike any other. He was not driven by revenge or loneliness. He was driven by curiosity. About people, about purpose, about what came next for a world built on old foundations. He learned from Kakashi, from Jiraiya who visited often, from his mother's guidance and his father's wisdom. Each mentor added a layer to him: humility, strength, compassion. By the time he turned 15, he had begun to feel the stirrings of destiny again, though shaped differently. There was no prophecy this time, no nine tails within him. Yet somehow, he felt the same energy, the same invisible thread that connected him to something vast. The world around him was evolving. Ninja villages were beginning to share knowledge. Technology was emerging slowly. Radio communication, chakra-based tools, and early prototypes of what would one day shape Boruto's era. Naruto found himself fascinated by these innovations. He believed that the next generation of shinobi wouldn't win through power alone, but through understanding. Still, there was something missing in him. A hunger not for recognition, but for purpose. One evening, while sitting atop the Hokage monument, he realized it. He wanted to surpass his father not in strength, but in vision. He wanted to build a world where children like him would never be defined by lineage, power, or fear. And that was the beginning of his own path. The quiet forming of a dream that would soon grow into something that could shake nations. For Naruto, the world had never been cruel. But he would soon learn that even a peaceful world carries shadows waiting to rise again. Morning sunlight spilled gently over the rooftops of Konoha, touching the leaves that crowned the hidden village. The air carried the scent of rain and smoke, the quiet hum of a world rebuilt after chaos. Years ago, on a night meant for tragedy, destiny had faltered. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, had survived. His wife, Kushina Uzumaki, had survived. And their newborn son, Naruto, had opened his eyes not to loneliness, but to love. That night, the night of the nine tails, was spoken of only in whispers. Minato's brilliance had found another way. Instead of sealing the full beast within a child, he had divided it, half inside himself, half within Kushina. The balance was fragile but possible. Both lived, though each bore a weight that few could comprehend. And because they lived, the Leaf Village changed. No one grew up calling Naruto a monster. No one avoided him on the streets. He was not the lonely boy beneath an empty sky, he was the son of heroes. Their home stood near the village edge, surrounded by whispering trees. Kushina loved mornings. She would hum as she cooked, her red hair tied loosely, while Minato sat at the small wooden table reading mission reports between sips of tea. And Naruto, wide-eyed and messy-haired, would sit cross-legged on the floor, waiting impatiently for breakfast, bouncing with energy he didn't yet know how to use. To the world, Minato was the fourth Hokage, the yellow flash, the savior of nations. To Naruto, he was simply Dad, the man who smelled like ink and wind, who tripped over scrolls when he was tired, who always smiled even when he looked exhausted. And Kushina, she was his world's heartbeat. Loud, passionate, protective, and endlessly loving. She scolded him fiercely when he broke things and hugged him just as fiercely afterward. Her warmth filled the house like sunlight through open windows. For Naruto, childhood was not about survival, It was about discovery. He learned to walk between stacks of scrolls and kunai racks. He learned his first words watching his father practice sealing arts. Sometimes he would wander into the Hokage's office and proudly announce that he was going to be Hokage Jr. The entire office staff would laugh, and Minato, pretending to look serious, would say, "Then start by cleaning your room, future Hokage." Naruto would groan, but he'd do it anyway. Because deep inside, he wanted to be like his father, but also something more. As he grew, he began to sense what it meant to be the Hokage's son. Villagers greeted him with smiles, but sometimes, when they thought he wasn't listening, they whispered. They spoke of the power sealed within his mother, of the night the nine tails roared. Naruto didn't fully understand, but he could feel the weight behind their words. He once asked his mother, "Why do they look at us like that sometimes?" Kushina smiled, brushing his hair gently. "Because they don't understand what love can hold," she said. "But one day, you'll show them." Naruto didn't quite grasp it, but he remembered. When he entered the ninja academy, the entire village seemed to expect greatness from him. He was the Hokage's son, the red-hot-blooded child of the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. Teachers watched him more closely. Classmates compared him to his father. Some admired him. Others envied him. Naruto tried to ignore it. He wasn't chasing fame. He just wanted to be good enough on his own terms. In class, he was sharp but easily distracted. He loved taijutsu practice and hated written tests. He laughed loudly, helped classmates who struggled, and sometimes challenged teachers with too many questions. Iruka, his teacher, often said, "Naruto, you've got more energy than the whole class combined." At home, Kushina became his personal trainer. She'd drag him outside, sparring with him under the shade of trees, yelling encouragements and warnings all at once. Minato taught him meditation, focus, and chakra control. His lessons were quiet and patient, hours of standing still, feeling the flow of energy. Sometimes Naruto preferred his mother's wild pace, sometimes he preferred his father's calm. He didn't realize it, but the two sides of his parents, the flame and the wind, were shaping him into something balanced and rare. Years passed peacefully. Under Minato's rule, the Leaf entered a golden age. Alliances strengthened, the Uchiha clan remained loyal, and the wars of the past faded into distant stories. The village expanded, technology slowly advanced, and children like Naruto grew up not in fear but in curiosity. Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto's classmate, was his equal in talent and opposite in temperament. The two competed constantly, sparring in training fields, racing across rooftops, trying to outdo each other in everything. Yet unlike in another world, their rivalry was never poisoned by loneliness or tragedy. It was pure, born from friendship and the desire to be better. Sakura Haruno, bright and ambitious, joined their circle too. Team 7 became a trio of balance: Sasuke's precision, Sakura's intellect, and Naruto's heart. When they graduated, they were placed under the guidance of Kakashi Hatake. For Kakashi, seeing Minato's son was like watching a memory reborn. But this Naruto was not the lost boy of another life. He was whole, confident, and full of light. Their first missions were simple: escorts, retrievals, small village disputes, but Naruto always turned them into adventures. He loved helping people, not for the mission rank, but for the feeling of purpose it gave him. He was curious about everything. Why did ninja fight? Why did peace always seem temporary? Why did his father still carry the look of someone who'd seen too much? One day, when he asked, Minato said something that stayed with him forever. Because peace, Naruto, isn't a gift. It's a responsibility. Naruto didn't fully understand, but he felt the truth in his father's tone. As years passed, the peace they all enjoyed began to show cracks. Small rogue factions formed beyond the great villages, warriors who believed that peace had made shinobi weak. Rumors spread of a group rising in the mist, whispering about the old ways of strength. Minato and the other Kage watched closely, but they hoped to resolve things without war. At 13, Naruto was still too young to understand the weight of politics. But he could sense the tension in his parents. His father came home later, his mother grew quieter. He overheard fragments of conversations, meetings, strategy, concerns about balance. One night, something happened that changed him forever. A small team of rogue ninja infiltrated Konoha, aiming to capture the Hokage's son as leverage. Naruto, out with friends, was caught off guard. He fought back instinctively, using the training his parents had given him, but the situation turned deadly fast. Before harm could reach him, Anbu forces and Minato himself intervened, ending the threat instantly. The attackers were defeated, but one of them was a child barely older than Naruto. Seeing that boy's lifeless face struck something deep within him. That night, Naruto couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, staring at the stars, wondering why someone his age had to die for hatred he didn't create. Kushina found him awake, eyes heavy with confusion. She didn't lecture him that night. She just held him close and said softly, "The world doesn't need more people to fight it, Naruto. It needs people to love it enough to change it." Those words planted a seed that would grow slowly, quietly. From then on, Naruto trained with a new purpose. Not to surpass his father, not to impress anyone, but to understand. He studied sealing techniques from Kushina, advanced chakra control from Minato, and strategy from Kakashi. Jiraiya, the wandering sage, visited often, teaching Naruto about compassion, leadership, and the meaning of legacy. By 15, Naruto had become one of the brightest young shinobi in Konoha. Not the strongest, but the most balanced. His presence inspired others. He laughed easily, listened deeply, and fought only when there was no other choice. Yet he felt something stirring inside him, a quiet hunger. Not for power, but for direction. He could feel the world changing around him. New technology, new alliances, and old grudges fading but never vanishing completely. One evening, sitting atop the Hokage monument, Naruto looked out over the glowing lights of the village. The faces of past Hokage stared ahead. Hashirama's strength, Tobirama's order, Hiruzen's wisdom, Minato's grace. And he thought, they built this world. Now it's my turn to understand it. That was the moment his true dream was born. Not to be Hokage for the title, but to be someone who could protect peace from within, not through force, but through connection. For the first time, Naruto realized that love could be stronger than any jutsu. That true power wasn't about chakra, it was about understanding hearts. And though peace surrounded him, shadows still waited beyond the horizon. Because even in a world where his parents lived, destiny never stopped testing those with the will to change it. The storm that would challenge Naruto's ideals was already gathering, far beyond the borders of the leaf. But for now, as the wind brushed through his hair and the village lights flickered below, Naruto smiled, grateful, strong, and unaware that the world was about to test whether love could truly rewrite fate. In another world, one where fate bent gently instead of cruelly, the night of the Nine Tails attack ended differently. The beast still roared. The village still trembled. But when Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, looked into the eyes of his newborn son, he refused to let destiny take everything away. Kushina lived. Her chakra chains bound the raging fox long enough for Minato to seal half of the beast inside himself, and the other half inside their child, not as a curse, but as protection. When the light faded, when the smoke cleared, the cries of the baby echoed through a world that had been given a second chance. Naruto Uzumaki grew up with the kind of laughter that echoed through every corner of the Namikaze household. His mother's fiery voice scolding him for climbing the roof again, his father's soft chuckle as he watched from the porch. For the village, the boy was a reminder of survival, not tragedy. The name, Uzumaki Naruto, became one of hope, not fear. Every morning began the same way. Kushina dragging her sleepy son out of bed, his hair as wild as ever, and Minato quietly sipping tea before heading to the Hokage's office. Naruto would always try to sneak out to follow him, pretending to be a spy or a secret guard. Minato never stopped him. He'd just turn, smile, and let Naruto think he wasn't noticed. At the academy, Naruto wasn't the troublemaker everyone once knew. He was loud, yes. Restless, absolutely. But now, when he failed a jutsu, his mother was there to help him try again, and his father reminded him that strength wasn't about being perfect, it was about never giving up on yourself. Iruka sensei still taught him. Sasuke still existed. Brilliant, quiet, and intense, but he no longer looked at Naruto with disdain. They were rivals, but also friends, bonded by competition rather than loneliness. Sakura admired Naruto's energy but often complained that he was too much like his mom. Even Kakashi, who trained under Minato years ago, found himself smiling whenever he saw the boy dash through the village shouting, "I'm gonna be Hokage like Dad someday." Konoha thrived in peace. With Minato's guidance and Kushina's compassion, the village rebuilt stronger than ever. No child was left alone, no orphan forgotten. Naruto didn't understand how rare this world was, how many hearts had once been broken in another timeline. He just lived, free and bright. But peace has its own shadows. As Naruto grew older, he began to feel something inside. Not anger, not hatred, but a deep restless energy that stirred whenever he pushed himself too far. Sometimes, when he sat quietly by the river behind his house, he could hear a faint voice within. A low, rumbling growl. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, still lived within him. Unlike the other timeline, the seal was stable. Kurama couldn't control Naruto, but it whispered sometimes, curious about this boy who smiled so much. Greater than, "You're strange, brat," the voice would murmur deep in Naruto's mind. "You have my power, yet you laugh instead of fight." Naruto never fully answered. He didn't understand who or what the voice was. But somehow, he didn't feel afraid. He believed every voice deserved to be heard, just like his parents had taught him. Years passed. By age 10, Naruto was already known as the Hokage's whirlwind. His chakra control was clumsy but fierce. Kushina trained him personally in Uzumaki sealing arts, though she often ended up yelling, "Naruto, you can't just explode every tag you make." Minato, in turn, taught him patience, the art of thinking before acting, something Naruto found nearly impossible. The boy's heart was too big, too wild. But Minato never scolded him for that. He saw himself in his son. That same reckless bravery, that same desire to protect everyone. One evening, as the sunset painted the village gold, Naruto asked a question that caught his father off guard. "Dad, if there's peace now, do I still need to become Hokage?" Minato smiled. "Peace isn't forever, Naruto. It's something we protect, every day. Being Hokage isn't about fighting. It's about making sure others don't have to." Naruto thought for a long time that night. Maybe being Hokage wasn't about being the strongest, maybe it was about carrying everyone's hearts together. But even as he dreamed, far beyond Konoha's peaceful borders, something stirred. Old rivalries, broken clans, and forgotten enemies who watched from the shadows. Not everyone accepted the balance that Minato created. And one day, that balance would test everything Naruto had ever believed.